Now, when we think about the current system we have, no one would say that the current system is one in which the wealthy have no particular influence and the wealthy are just as likely to be found guilty as just a regular schmo. I mean, anybody watching a celebrity trial knows that the celebrity seems to get a lesser sentence and greater consideration. So nobody's saying that we have a perfect system now, but I think the concern would be that if you had a market system, there'd be no way to prevent the super wealthy from from being able to exert their influence over the private courts. Is there any way to prevent that or shield against that?
Yeah, let me make a couple of related points. The first is that the really big inequality at the moment is not so much between the rich and the poor as between the government and everybody else. That, as you probably know, the director of national intelligence committed perjury. He told a lie to Congress in sworn testimony sometime within the last year. He admitted doing it, although not in so many words. What he said was that he had told as much truth as he could. And there is no chance at all that he will be indicted for perjury, which happens to be a crime. Barry Bonds, on the other hand, who was a prominent and wealthy person, got into a whole lot of trouble for doing essentially the same thing, except that he didn't admit that he had lied, although it may well be that he did. So I would say that the first big inequality in our present system is that since criminal law is controlled by the state, and you don't get a trial unless somebody charges you and indicts you, the state always has the option of simply ignoring crimes that are committed by people who they approve of, as in the case of the perjury that was done in order to hide what the National Security Agency was doing in terms of spying on the population. I could offer quite a lot of other examples. The one that originally struck me a very long time ago when I was a graduate student in Chicago was that a group of Chicago policemen came to the door of an apartment full of sleeping people and opened fire through the walls, killing 2 people. The people inside were Black Panthers, who the Chicago police didn't much like. The police claimed the Panthers had shot first, but no evidence was ever offered for that. None of the policemen was ever charged with murder, which was pretty clearly what they had committed. They did get sued, however. That is, the city, state, and county, I think, ended up settling with the survivors for a several $100,000 damage payment, because tort law, where you sue people, is partly under private control. It's the victim who gets to sue, whereas criminal law is entirely under public control. So I think my first answer is that my system eliminates the really big inequality, which is that, as I like to put it in a historical context, if the king controls criminal punishment, the king's friends can get away with murder. And in the particular case I described, they did. The second point, though, is that if you look at how markets function, not very much of what they produce is aimed at the super rich. That GM doesn't mainly make gold-plated Cadillacs. The big market is usually in the middle for people who have some money but not huge amounts. A court which routinely gives unjust verdicts in favor of rich clients isn't going to be very popular with anybody else. And if you look in our society at where the inequality is greatest, it's not on the market. The 2 things with regard to which poor people in America are worse off are police protection and education, both of which are being provided by the state. That if you go to a poor area of the inner city, the grocery stores have the same goods as in the rich areas. The quality isn't quite as good, and the prices are a bit higher, and there's a smaller selection, but it's not a huge difference. I've lived in such areas, or at least shopped in such areas occasionally. On the other hand, people in those areas don't have the option of going to a school nearly as good as a suburban school, and they don't have the option of walking around at night as I can do in reasonable safety with confidence there'll be no crimes. So I think on the whole, government does a rather worse job of providing services to the poor than the market does, not a better job.